All right, guys. So this one's going to be a bit of a long one. We're going to be talking about painting density masks. So we talked about creating our eyelashes, and now we're going to we talked about the PTEX paintings out of Maya, but now I'm going to talk about how we're going to paint density masks inside of an external software. For this one, we're going to use Mari. So if you don't know how to use Mari, I recommend you do some tutorials beforehand because we're not going to be covering the basics of this. So I'm going to start with just a default Arnold standard surface preset, load in my geometry, which was just I exported the master head that we cut up for our XGen pieces. And I'm just basically going to keep the, clicking things. Okay. So I'm just going to keep it exactly how it is, and then I'm going to load in an environment map and turn all the standard lights off, all the CG lights that come with it off. So this is my default setup for painting density maps. We don't want anything fancy. We're just painting a mask, so we're not doing any sort of texturing or anything like that. So I'm going to be using the node graph for this, and I'm just minimizing stuff by clicking that little, oh my goodness, it's a little swirly on the side. I'm holding tab to search for things, and I'm creating a color node to start out with, and I'm going to basically create two of these, so it seems redundant, but I'm going to be creating a mask within, I'm basically going to be masking out black and white to do this. The reason why I do this is because I might want to change the base color of how much hair is coming through, which is the white value or the black value at any point, so I'm going to try to work as non-destructively as possible and use masks where I can and color nodes where I can. All right, so now that I've made my color node, I'm just setting up my template a bit here. So we've got our shelf we're going to need because we're going to need to have some brushes for our painting purposes. We're going to need our node properties and we're going to need our node graph. In the preferences, I'm also going to make sure that I've changed my control type, my navigation to Maya, and my show port list is horizontal in the node graph. That's only two things I've preset up before we started. All right, so this is going to be my default setup for Mari is I'm just going to set this gray color and I'm popping it into the diffuse color, spec rough, and bump. So this is how I set up all my projects before I start, just so I can see a base value of everything and make sure that my lights are proper and everything. Obviously, we're not texturing anything crazy, but I would like to still have things set up a bit nice before we get started. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is just tweak these lights a little bit because it's quite intense and it's not rotated the right direction. So I'm going to make sure that my general is set to fixed to camera so that when I rotate my model, my background rotates with it. I'm going to blur it just a little bit and I'm going to rotate it just so that the light is actually coming from the front so that we're not getting some weird backlighting happening. All right, so that should be fine. It is also a bit strong, so I'm going to turn down the intensity just a smidge. All right, so this is fine. More than enough for what we need to do, but at least we've got something that looks a bit more reasonable. So again, this is just that XGen face cutoff, that master one that we made. So this has every single piece of anything that we'll need to paint XGen on, and this has the UVs all in the first UV space and everything. So this should line up with every other piece of geometry we cut because the UVs didn't change. All right, so these are my settings for my projection and my painting. You're going to want auto bake and clear, front, and selected only on. So you're going to make sure that you select the head when you're painting so that you can actually paint on this object with that setting on that says project on selected only. And make sure front is on so you're not projecting through the entire model. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start creating channels for my mask. So I'm calling this eyelash density and making sure that my color space is raw and that it's set to scalar data. So this is basically going to tell it that we want it to be black and white information. And we're going to duplicate this like however many masks you need to make for your groom. For our groom, we're going to do basically what we've decided in our flow paint overs, we decided on a few descriptions. So I usually try to paint these density masks ahead of time. There may be other masks we need to paint later on while we're grooming, but then we could pop back into our file here and just paint those masks and come right back. Some of them I may decide to paint inside of Maya, and that's okay. But if you can, I would recommend painting masks elsewhere because you get more control over the smoothness and the fall off of your colors. All right, so I'm going to plug this into my diffuse color after I've finished renaming all of my masks properly. So you can see there's eyelash, eyebrow, mane hair, beard, and baby hairs. All right, so I'm going to create a white color, and then the next one I'm duplicating by Control C and Control V to make a black color. And I'm going to change the color of this. So again, what I was talking about before is I'm going to be creating masks in masks, I guess. So, because I never know if I might want to change the value of the black color. So let's say my mask, I didn't want it to basically mask out the entire thing. Then at least this is as non-destructive as I can possibly make it. I'm going to click M to merge these two together. And then I'm going to add a paint node. So I'm adding a paint node that is only scalar information, so I can actually add a mask in here. And this is where I'm going to paint the eyelash mask. So I'm going to make sure that I fill. So I'm going to go to right click. I'm going to turn on my wireframe so I can see what I'm doing because it's a black model. It's hard to see. And then I'm going to start painting on this mask. When I create my paint node, I actually filled it with black in the background. So the paint node was just filled with black, and we're only painting a white on top. So the white is where the eyelash is going to show through, and that's where the hair is going to grow. And then the black is where it's not going to grow. For eyelashes, I usually try to keep this pretty crisp because we don't usually have like tiny stray little hairs coming out. Like I try to keep this pretty clean because our hairs just kind of sprout out in like a really clean line from our eyebrows. Eyelashes. Yeah, keeping this pretty clean. We can smooth it a little bit, but for the most part, eyelashes seem to be pretty regulated hair source, I guess you could say. All right, so that's for the bottom. We're probably going to want it to be a bit more sparse near the tear duct. So that's probably where I'm going to make it a little bit more gray. So gray would mean that less hairs are going to grow there. So the more towards black it is, the less hairs will grow. And the more white it is, the more hairs will grow. All right, so I'm going to try to paint the top as well. So I'm kind of following the line flow of the topology that I have here because that's going along the eyelash line. So as close to this line as possible is going to be a bit more accurate to where the eyelashes are growing. All right, so you can see that that's kind of spot on. So you can use the UV mode and also the ortho mode to kind of get a little more accurate with your painting. I'm going to go and demo these masks or the eyelash mask with you a little bit. And then I'll kind of fast forward through the other ones, I think, because we won't go through the same process over and over again, a bit redundant to see, but you can see here, I'm changing my color to black and I'm using an opacity on here and I'm trying to just like fade out a little bit from the bottom because a little less hairs grow from the bottom than the top. And then also into like the corners, like where the tear duct area is. So unfortunately, there's no magic button to mirror to the other side, unless your face is completely symmetrical, but most of the time it's not. So we're going to have to just wing it and do the same on the other side. So it can be a bit tedious, but just bear with me while we paint the other side. Exactly the same idea is we're going to be painting the same technique. So we're going to paint very, very thin. We may need to adjust where it's sprouting out, but it's hard to tell until we get it inside of Maya what we're really doing. But for the most part, it looks pretty okay. So you can see here I'm painting just by looking at this, but you can see it's a little less accurate. So I could go into the UV mode if I want and just fix this and clean it up a bit. All right, so that's probably too thick. So let's just go and switch to black and paint over this and clean it up a bit. Make it a little thinner. We don't want heaps of hair to grow from here. And she's gonna love it. She's got really thick eyelashes. Let's do the same trick where we turn this opacity down to 0.2 on the black, and then we kind of go over this a bit and turn down that heavy white color so we could get a little less growth. Again, this is going to be hard to see much of. If you want to be more specific with this kind of stuff as well and try to work as non-destructive as possible, you could create another merge and another mask on top just to paint more black on top. The more layers you have in here, obviously the less destructive it's going to be. And the more easily you'll be able to make these changes to the amount of hair. All right, so I'm basically going to repeat the exact same kind of thing, but for the eyebrows. So here I will go a little slow as well so you can see what's going on with the eyebrows. So those, so I'm going to create a new shelf, called the beard. Let's do the beard together, not the eyebrows. Sorry, we're going to call it beard, but we're going to use it for the eyebrows and for the beard. Okay, so we're going to grab those images that we edited together in Photoshop and we're going to drag them in here. And these are going to be used as a guide, which is going to be awesome. So again, we're going to turn on the wireframe so we can see what we're doing. And then we're going to use these images to project on top as a guide to where we're going to paint the density and adjust from there our values for our mask. So this can be useful if you actually have a digidouble that lines up with your photo reference. And you can just project the images on top and use it as a guide, which is super efficient because there's nothing more real than real. So I'm going to go through the exact same process. I'm creating a full black paint node with a scalar parameter turned on. Sorry, not parameter, but scalar checkbox turned on. And then I'm going to turn this is going to be my eyebrow density mask. So I'm basically just duplicating all of these because I know that this is going to be the exact same setup for everything. So I'm going to go ahead and just quickly organize my Mari just a little bit better. So I'm adding the dots just by holding down Control and clicking the little dot that kind of sprouts out, just so I can have some organization in my life. But I basically just grab those two nodes and Control C, Control V to copy and paste them. And I'm just hooking them all up to the same black and white color nodes that I made, just so I can save a little bit of memory and space by not having a giant scene size. And I've just duplicated that same paint node that I made for the eyebrow density mask that I haven't painted on yet. So it's literally just a filled black paint node. So that's what's in there right now. And I will rename those to the corresponding masks that we're making. As soon as I'm done making this look so sort of pretty. All right, let's plug those into our mask channels. So the reason why we want channels is so that we can actually export. Channels are what is being exported. Channel just tells it that it's a separate map to export, right? So we're going to change these masks to their corresponding channels, which is baby hair density mask, and then the hair density mask and beard density mask, all of that. So these are essentially just ready to start painting. So I've prepped them and they're ready, but we haven't done it yet, but at least they're ready. And this is all we're going to need. All right, so I'm going to view through the channel by clicking 1 on the eyebrow density mask. And then I'm going to drag and drop. And while I'm clicking the eyebrow density mask paint node, I'm going to start projecting this eyebrow through. So I might use the close-up eyebrow because this one is it's not super great. We're not getting close enough in here to get any sort of major awesome hair details. Not that we need to or anything, but it's just we need to use we need a pretty good guide to see how the hairs are growing and where exactly they are. So I'm basically going to try my best to line this up with the eyeball underneath, and I'm zooming in as close as I possibly can to project this onwards. Because the thing is with Mari, the closer you're zoomed in, more resolution you're actually projecting down, which is really weird to think about, but it's actually how it works. The more screen space you take up, the more resolution you're projecting down. So the better it's going to look as a final projection. All right, so you can see that I kind of I'm just gonna use the lattice tool after I've kind of projected this down a bit and just move this around a bit. I may use the closer one and different angles to get a better view of how the eyebrow is working, but I'm using the lattice tool that was just on the side there to kind of project this and put this into place and bend it around to kind of fit where it's supposed to go. All right, so I'm also just going over this with a black basic paintbrush just to clean it up a little bit. Sorry for the speed of this, but you can see now we're using the higher resolution image. And I'm just projecting this down in close to the same spot as the other one. And I'm going to use the lattice tool to deform this back. We can also go into the orthographic view and the UV view just to see what we're doing and see how it looks. So that's another trick as well for projecting this stuff down. I'm going to try to get it as accurate as possible. It may not be right, but at least it's just going to be used as a guide, right? So we're going to be cleaning this up, fixing it a little bit. And then obviously anything that's like overgrowing, we don't want the hair to grow past where it's supposed to grow. That's not cool. So we're not gonna do that too much. All right, so to place these eyebrows, I'm looking at the images I'm projecting down, but I'm also looking on my second monitor at the references. You'll notice that it's really important to grab a PureRef document and set up all of your images there and constantly be looking at them just to get an idea of spatial awareness of where things are on the face and how they feel when you put them on there. That one looked a little bit better. So you can see it takes a little while to get something that works, to get it zoomed into the right size and scale and everything. But I think we got it. I'm just testing by projecting the eye down and seeing how close we're in here. I don't think the hairs are going far enough back. We need to have more, but this is giving us a good enough idea of how things are supposed to be. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm creating another merge that's going to happen right after this one. And I'm going to, sorry, ignore that. Okay, we're going to create another merge. On the right one. All right, we're creating another merge right after this merge. And we're going to create another paint node, and we're going to basically just start painting on this one with a little bit more white. So this one is kind of going to be our main source. So again, the eyebrow projection was just as a guide. I used the levels to levels out some of that crazy information we had in there, but we're obviously missing a lot of hair growth. So that's kind of what I'm going through here is I'm trying to like just nail down all the space where the hair is actually growing from, and not where it's extending out to. That's really important is try your best not to paint where the hair is growing to, because then you're going to have extremely widespread eyebrows where they're not supposed to be. So take into account how long those eyebrow hairs are and where the root is that they're growing from. So that's what I'm trying to paint now. All right, so I'm using a very soft brush to kind of get a little bit of those hairs to grow on the top and the bottom, just because we have that like kind of spread hairs. It may be a little bit intense, so I might go down and reduce this a little bit later. But you can also see I increased the exposure at the bottom there to 1.3. So this is actually helping me see if I've accidentally painted anywhere else but the eyebrows. This can happen sometimes, and that's actually what's happening inside of Maya when you use PTEX. Sometimes you paint way too far away and it spreads way too far from the actual place you're trying to paint, and that's why you randomly get little hairs just sprouting everywhere, is because it's actually information that was projected down that you cannot see. Strange enough. So that's why I prefer to use like Mari or Photoshop, and that's what was recommended to me a long time ago. All right, so let's talk about using these same images for the beard. We're going to do the exact same thing. So again, it's just going to be using this as a guide. We're going to project down. We're going to project all these images, and we're going to be using this as a main guide to start where we're going to be painting. It's the exact same process as the eyebrows. So project it down, then create another merge, merge in a paint node, and then paint your base on top of that with a soft brush, and try to get where the root of the hair is and not where it's growing to. So the mustache is a big culprit for that as well, where you're going to basically be dealing with trying to figure out where the root of the hair finishes versus where the actual hairs grow out to, where the extinction of the hair is. All right, so I'm just projecting it down and using the lattice tool, lining it up, and then hitting project. Again, I apologize for anyone who's new to Mari. This is not going to be an easy one to follow because it's quite quick-paced. If you've used Mari before, it should be quite simple, hopefully, because it's very, very a few simple moves to get this stuff done. But if you haven't used Mari before, this is all completely doable inside of Photoshop or any of your favorite paint packages. You can just pop this in, use the same approach, and paint these maps inside of Photoshop. I just prefer to use Mari because it's more comfortable for me. But yeah, you can use whatever you want. So exactly the same approach. We create the merge node and then we pop in that paint node and we adjust and fix all of our projections. So I'm going to be using a lot of different brushes. I may use like some sponge brushes or some squiggles to kind of like, imitate that a bit of like an edge breakup. So we have a little bit of like random hairs sprouting out. It's not really super necessary. Like we could use like just a soft fall off brush. Doesn't need to be anything fancy. So, but I mean, if it makes you feel better, we could use a sponge brush and that's cool too. So, having just like not like basically not having like a straight, extinction point and like hard line for your mask is probably the best bet, because you don't really want just like a place where the hair stops growing, especially for beards and like the ends and hairlines of things. Eyelashes kind of the only exception because eyelashes just grow from one single uh, section on your eye. So I'm kind of cleaning this up. It looks a lot neater than it should, and that's actually funny because it should look really messy, but when we grow it out, trust me, it's going to look messy as hell. Um, Pardon my language. But yeah, but we just want to make this clean and efficient, so it's growing, we're painting exactly where it's growing from. Again, I apologize for the speed of this video, but I have already talked to you about everything we're doing. So I just want you to be able to kind of see what's happening as I talk you through it, so you can actually get an idea of what these maps look like as they're being worked on and then as a final result. During the groom process, you will be inside of Mari and outside of Mari, just like going kind of back and forth between these density masks, because again, it's really hard to kind of decide if this is a final look for you until you get it in there and start seeing what it's doing for the hair. I just prefer to paint something to start out with before I start my grooms because this is like going to be the biggest thing that you're going to need when you start your groom. So it's nice to have a starting point before you get all up in there and start working. All right, so let's talk about the main hair density mask. So this one is basically going to be the exact same approach. We're going to use the same image. We're going to use this to kind of see where the hairline is and project it back down again. Again, same approach as the eyebrows and the beard. We're just going to project it down, use the lattice to like move it around, and then clean up that hairline just a little bit. We have a lot of black spots in this image on the actual hair itself because obviously the color correction and the strands didn't really work. So we're going to clean that up as well. We don't really want missing sections because everywhere that there's black is where there's going to be hair that doesn't grow. So we want to be very careful with cleaning this up properly. I'll give you a little demo later about what happens when you don't clean up the projections by using the little overexposure section on the bottom of your Mari screen. So where that right beside the F/the 8 and right by so where it says 1 next to the F/8, so yeah, f-stop, all that stuff. If you bump that up from 1 to like, let's say 5 or 2 or something crazy, just a higher number than 1, you'll be able to see the overexposure, and then you can clean up your maps and your projections because you're going to see a lot of gross stuff. So I recommend that you do that. Later on, I'll show you what happens when you don't. All right, so I'm just kind of cleaning up this hairline a little bit based off of my image with a sponge brush. It's my favorite one to use to kind of give like a little bit of an uneven hairline. So you'll kind of get like random places where the hair grows from, which is kind of nice. I'll probably go over this and make it a little bit like opaque, like just with a little bit of opacity so that we get a little bit less hair growing from the front. So we kind of get a smooth transition. We don't have like heaps of hair just spreading from nowhere, and we don't kind of have a slow transition. So I'm just going over again. Yeah, so exactly with that, creating this like a little bit of a tiny fall off. We don't want like anything extreme because then we're going to have like a massive receding hairline. We don't want that. We just want something that's going to be a little bit of like a smooth transition because it can be pretty daunting when you just have like random hairs just like bam, there's the hair. All right, so the last one is going to be baby hairs, but that's going to be hard to do until we actually start grooming. So we're going to save that till a little bit later. So let's talk about exporting. So the last thing I want to talk about is exporting these maps out of here once we've actually finished them. So we're going to save this, go to channels, and go to the export manager. Okay, So here, you're going to see just all of those regular sources, which is all the channels that we don't actually want to export. So I'm going to pick my export route path, and I'm just going to find some place to export this to organize my folders by dates so I know what exactly is when. So I'm going to grab all of the ones I do not want to export. I'm just going to right click and say remove selected. All right, so I'm going to add new export items, and I'm going to make sure to click all of the ones that I want to now export that I just created. So I'm going to turn all of those ones off because I don't need them right now in this demo, but we're going to make sure that we change, or it's going to make sure, we're going to make sure that it's TIFF, sorry, and that it's all 4K, and then just export the current. All the default settings should be perfectly fine. If you're exporting all the maps, you're going to click export all. All right. So let's go back into Maya. And here, I'm going to show you what this does when we plug in the density map. Okay. So this is what you're going to do for all of these masks. So we talked about PTEX painting, and that's how we got this result. But you're going to see right away how clean this is going to make it, okay? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go find in here that PTEX map we painted, which is going to be our file 1. And you're going to see it's called XGen shape man, blah, blah, blah. When we graph it with the 2 double arrows, we can find it here, and then we can look for our exported texture and plug it in here. So into that little folder on the side. Okay, so I'm looking for my exported mask and I'm going to plug it in. All right, so now you can see the painted mask. Okay. All right, we're going to click save. Okay, so now you can see we have a much cleaner result of where things are going. We need to turn the density up quite a bit to like actually see how this is working. I might be a little heavy on like the opacity on the bottom eyelash, but for the most part, you're kind of seeing what's happening. All right, so that's basically how you will put in your density masks for all of your XGen descriptions as you paint them. So any mask that you paint, it doesn't have to be a density mask. It could be a length mask. It could be a width mask. It could be whatever mask you want to paint, basically. But this is how you're going to plug them all in. Right, and then it's going to be a lot of back and forth between Mari and Maya just to fix things up a little bit and tweak this and that, but at least we have the basics down and we have things set up so that we can easily pop in, copy things, paint, adjust, and then get back into Maya with our results.